Okay, hello everybody. Hope you all had a good week. So as always, this is the weekly session that we're going to be doing now. I'll go through a few updates on what's been happening through the week, things I think you need to be aware of, and then as usual, this is your session really. So if you want to come up on stage and share some thoughts on anything we're discussing, then you are welcome to do so. As with all of our spaces, we record, so everything's on the record. Anything you say will be on my Twitter, and then it will also go on YouTube, so we can hold ourselves accountable there. Okay, so a few updates. It's been another week of drama, as always. There's anything I discuss is going to be things on the public information. There's a bunch of stuff that I can't discuss in non-public information. But I don't know if any of you came in yesterday, but there was something really sketchy that happened yesterday. It was a bit strange. So Rob from Digital Asset News, I've been on his channel quite a few times, and he asked me if I could come on because there was going to be a presentation on potential recovery plans, and he asked me if I could just share a few thoughts on it. So I came on and I got a calendar invite. And the calendar invite put me on one of his, as usual, when I go on his show. And there was no one there. So I got a direct message from somebody saying, oh, it's over here. And it was really strange. Then the whole space was hosted by somebody else. And Rob from Digital Asset News was kind of just sat there in the background. And then Alex Mashinsky comes up as well. And so we had a bit of an altercation. It wasn't recorded, but somebody recorded it out there. So I retweeted just so everyone can catch up in case. And then, yeah, there was a bit of an altercation, a little bit of drama. And then it just went on for hours and hours of people that were just upset with me for speaking not so nicely to Alex and asking questions. And so it was a really, really strange thing. It was really quite sketchy. But everyone that came up was kind of from the one side of thought, and then there was no real balance in it. So it was just a bit of a barrage. But anyway, apologies for anyone that had to go through that. But that was what happened yesterday. But anyway, back to more important news and not so much drama. So we started to see some of the things that I was fearful of as we entered into this bear markets and some of the bankruptcies came through. And I started to report on how this was our Lehman Brothers of crypto moment. And that this is going to be way more systemic. And so we have to get a great results out of these bankruptcies in order to prevent some of the systemic risks on the market. Well, some of those are starting to come through now. So we've started to see some mining companies go into bankruptcy. And so that's really not a good sign. It's not bad for necessarily Bitcoin mining, because Bitcoin mining has always had a difficulty rate adjustment. So every 2 weeks, if miners come offline, as we saw during the China mining ban, every 2 weeks the miners come offline. If miners come offline every 2 weeks, the difficulty adjusts, and depending on the hash rate. And so that caused a bit of the initial collapse in the market that led to the bear market when I started covering that. And really, it was a remigration of mining power to different jurisdictions. Also, because of the traditional economy supply shocks, I covered these in previous videos on my YouTube channel. We've had a supply shock in the supply of money, which has also led to a cost of living crisis, and also the supply shock with commodities, oil, and some of the geopolitical situation, which is escalating. When I was writing my book, before all these Chapter 11s got in the way, I was really following the money around Ukraine and the NATO money flows, and also the different turning events with Taiwan since the war, and China, and going through some projections on the monetary flows around the likelihood of escalation, and the likelihood of that leading to a multi-decade cycle in a change of world reserve currency and superpower. But we're starting to see now with China and Xi Jinping meeting up with Putin, NATO escalations. I'm not expecting, a world war in terms of military, but I'm certainly expecting trade wars, especially when we move into 2024 elections. You've got on the El Salvador side, you've got Nayib Bukele's re-election, which I think will be a windfall, but highly politicized as well, because of the changes that was made with re-elections, but also probably the return of Trump and all that will come with that, and all of the interesting scenarios. So I expect to see more geopolitical escalations, trade wars, technology wars, and just outright sanctions, ruining the user experience of money, showing the world that money at a central bank, you can't own it, you can't necessarily spend it unless you bow down to the existing empire's policy, and the driving the need for censorship resistance. I also spent a lot of time catching up with miners. So if you know, I've invested in several mining companies over the years. One of them was the company that Peter Thiel invested into, that really kicked off all the mining in Texas. And I caught up with some of the guys. They're actually migrating across to, they're exploring a migration across to Latin American region, due to some of the real cost increases of mining, and as a result of some of these geopolitical supply shocks. So that was interesting to also catch up on. And a lot of those are going to hit the market as well. So we started to see some of those first mining bankruptcies. That would lead to a difficulty rate adjustment, and also geopolitics coming out from all of the cryptocurrency and Biden's policies be put out there. Some of those miners are preparing for the fact that we've now moved to the merge, and Ethereum is going to end up more centralized now that everyone starts staking through CeFi platforms, rather than doing the hard work of DeFi, which probably leads to more regulatory capture. So now we haven't got the second major proof of work chain. Some people are forecasting the ESG narrative leading to the potential in the years ahead of a proof of work ban coming from the United States in the years ahead. I really hope that none of that happens. I think it would be a disaster strategy for the US. I think the US should really play the Bitcoin strategy. But I anticipate that could lead to a massive reallocation of the Bitcoin story, go into the Latin American region. And so we're starting to prepare for Bitcoin becoming a David beat Goliath Latin American story, whereby we have these large geopolitical forces, with China becoming a larger economy than taking over GDP in the US. And then Bitcoin policies actually becoming extremely politicized. So we've seen a big embracement of regulation. So you could look at it from the other side, but also depending on where the ESG narrative comes, whether the politicians start to recognize that actually using Bitcoin mining as an important tool for monetizing wasted electricity and pushing forward the innovation in the electrical, infrastructure, or whether they kind of bow down to the proof of stake narrative and therefore give this opportunity to a completely different region that then could start using more Bitcoin investment banking services that we've been working on, Bitcoin bonds, various other types of innovation and products that we were working on at the corporate and individual level over the years, and seeing if they actually have impact at the sovereign level. So geopolitically, it's very, very interesting. So expect some adjustments there, and those costs are really causing challenges as well, and a bit of a relocation. We also saw one of the mining pools suspend withdrawals as well. And that led to this interesting scenario where we're discussing IOU tokens. So the product, I released a video on it this morning, where IOU tokens, the product that we innovated to get Bitfinex out of bankruptcy when they lost 119,000 Bitcoin. The mining pool started to use that as well. We also saw a leak from Celsius, that they started to put together the plan that I presented to them prior to the Chapter 11 bankruptcy, but is missing some of the important elements. So if you haven't seen that video, check out the video I released on YouTube today explaining what made the IOU token work, and making sure that it's not missing the vital pieces that would support an effective recovery plan, rather than just taking half of the equation. What the pool-in mining pool, what they did right is they also made it convertible into equity, which is one of the important dynamics of making the IOU token work. I don't want to go too deep, but happy to answer questions. I also presented that to the Voyager community. With the Voyager, I did a couple of spaces, and let them, shared some information around what's happening in the bidding process. So we're starting to see that larger exchanges competing with less so known players in the industry. The less so known players in the industry are starting to really think about what would it take to retain those customers versus the larger players just looking at this as an opportunity to acquire cheap. And then those funds from the acquisition just being used to pay professional fees. So the professionals are incentivized in order to do the deal, because they get that injection of cash to pay the fees, and the creditors get shafted. So I was trying to support the Voyager community. I made a commitment to reach out to the UCC and various other players. So I'll update you on that and how that will progresses. But I want everyone in the Voyager that has been a victim to understand that these bids, I'm hoping, can be the beginning of the process rather than the end of the process. Because I think if many of these companies want to acquire, cheaply, then they should be at least offering up some of their equity. If they're a more established company, then they've got multi-billion-dollar equity stakes. They can put together a small pool to support creditors if they believe they want that relationship with them, and incentivize them to stay as well, as opposed to just accepting just a predatory bid and buying it on the cheap. So also we'll be presenting some more ideas around this IOU token, which I anticipate becoming a bit of a standard once the market did it. So we created it in 2016. It led to a very, very successful recovery. I don't want to go over what I covered in the video, but check out the video. I think it's going to be an important part. And if you remember, I was presenting prior to all the bankruptcies and the market going into bearish mode, a forecast around a DeFi and yield crackdown, followed by a long sideways market. Lots of, if this is your first Bitcoin bear market, expect lots of FUD, expect lots of bad announcements, expect all sorts of stuff, followed by a regulatory crackdown. And once you have the regulatory crackdown, I was anticipating this to be the third wave that leads to a securities boom, as many of these products and with the market going into two different directions. And this is why I diversify across the industry a lot with my investing. I make sure that I've got the right mix between central equity and centralized companies, and equity and tokens in the DeFi ecosystem. I'm anticipating some of that innovation to come through to Bitcoin. We've had a very slow development phase, but some of the earlier companies I invested in, like Rootstock, RSK, they've started to do some on-chain yield products, and so that's really interesting to see on top of Bitcoin. And we're also starting to see more of the innovation now that we've got through the merge. It was a bit of a buy the rumor, sell the fact. I do believe that this would lead to a bit of a Bitcoin-led recovery. And Ethereum traditionally outperforms Bitcoin, especially now they've changed their monetary policy. But I think it's a change in culture from focusing on utility to focusing more on the store of value narrative, which I think long term is not a good thing for Ethereum in the long term, because I think they've found their niche. And I'm not talking about a 3-5 year cycle. I'm talking about a 10-year cycle. So for the first, I'm gonna watch it out and see how much regulatory capture happens as a result of proof of stake. But my guess is that the exchanges are going to own the ecosystem. There's going to be more and more regulatory requirements on that. But the price narrative, I think, changes from less focus on utility, and then you have all the alternative blockchains. But it's a real shame that we've lost what was, one of the hardest part of this industry is actually creating a proof of work chain that worked. And even though there was a big pre-mine and it was listed as an ICO, it still managed to get that level of decentralization where regulators would be confident commenting, and even some of them considering whether it's a chain for use of their central bank digital currencies, which is somewhat inevitable, predictable, and guaranteed. I don't anticipate many of those central bank digital currencies being on blockchains in the end. I think it's just going to be centralized databases designed to have more control, less money that you can own, less money that you can spend, and supply that can be adjusted. With many of the things that you'd anticipate as the money goes more digital and not created by a bank anymore, but now created by either a government or central bank, just like Abraham Lincoln did when he bypassed the bond market and funded the American Civil War through the greenback. And therefore, that money was created directly by government and bypassed the central bank. I think you're going to see more of those types of battles. And obviously, Abraham Lincoln was a monetary reformer. Abraham Jackson, in the case of the United States, took down the first and second central bank as his political career. But then obviously the Federal Reserve got through, and then the banking sector took over the monetary supply. Check out other videos that I released this week on the stages of the different types of money, from hard money to credit money, to receipt money, and to fiat currency. And I also covered stock markets and how the central banks impact the stock markets and the cycles there. So I tried to do those in my morning gym routines. What else did we have? We've got a few more notes here before we start inviting people up. On the Celsius side, so we saw the motion filed today. Hopefully Thomas Brazil is here today. I'd love to get his comments on that. I know he's got some interesting stuff to say. So we started to see further division. It was interesting in the conversation with Alex Majinsky yesterday. He started to hint, even though he'd filed that his shares are worthless, that there's some value in the equity. Now, any value in the equity would be dilutive towards the creditors. And we've already started to see how those dynamics start to play out now when the Series B preferred investors have filed a motion. Just for full disclosure, I'm a shareholder in the ordinary shares in Celsius because we did the funding round for the Series A. And the way Bank to the Future works is we put together syndicates, and I'm sorry if this is a real legally geeky term, but it's important to understand. We create what's called a pass-through, non-discretionary SPV. How's that for a legally term? What it means is that whenever a company raises finance, because they're no longer public, we put together a special structure whereby they only have one or two investors on their cap table rather than having thousands of investors, which would make them, in some cases, a public company, which has lots of different requirements around it that often early stage companies can't meet those requirements because they're very difficult to manage. And so what we do is we pull them together into various SPVs that comply with companies. And then the company only needs to interact with one company on their as a shareholder. But behind that is 100% owned by a bunch of other shareholders. The way that it works is it's non-discretionary because it's not a fund. So what we did at Bank to the Future is we created a low-cost structure whereby if you normally invest in a traditional VC, when we were democratizing investing and allowing everybody to gain access to the growth of the industry and equity and shares in all the different companies that later became multi-billion dollars. We've had more unicorns than any other platform that I know of. When people were getting exposure to those and growth around those, a traditional venture capitalist has something called what's like a 2 and 20. A 2 and 20 means you have to pay 2% fee every year and you have to pay 20% on the upside. What we did at Bank to the Future is we kind of disrupted that market and created a low-cost structure whereby it's free to invest. There's no annual admin fee, but you pay 5% upon any returns, and that's one of our models for how Bank to the Future makes money. So the funds are made during distributions or IPOs or exits, which aligns our interests. But the downside of that is that you don't, by not paying the admin fee, you don't get the ability. It's not a managed fund, because then you have to have an additional collective investment scheme structure, which is actually one of the things that has played into many of the regulatory questions around and lending platforms around that collective investment scheme structure, which has significantly increased the costs and changes that. And so in order to keep the low cost, we did it where we just have what's known as pass through. So if the company wants to actually get a vote on anything, we pass through the vote to the individual investor rather than actually actively managing it and having to charge a fee in order to pay lawyers and everything to manage that. So as soon as any of those things come through, then we pass through the vote. And so the preference shareholders in the case of Celsius have decided to file that motion in order to try and claim that they own the Bitcoin mining part of Celsius. It was an interesting one because we first started discussing this. It was Thomas Breziel and myself about, I think, a couple of months back. I can't remember when. We were just hashing out some ideas on a public space. And we started to go through the flow and speculate, this was just speculation, that maybe the way that the pension fund, so it was a Canadian pension fund that invested in Celsius, and then there was a loan of the money over to the mining subsidiary. And we started to speculate, maybe they were just trying to get exposure to mining. And maybe they think that they have a claim over that mining just because of the way it might have been represented to them when they invested. And obviously, we know that that was misrepresented by Alex across the community, that they'd done deep DD and therefore everything was safe. And they had the 750 million backing, which when the Chapter 11, that was also a misrepresentation. It was 600 million rather than 750. And then the rest of the balance sheet was sell tokens and various other things. And so, but it was kind of like the selling point of why this is a safe place to put your life savings. And so, that's maybe what's happening here. All speculation there. But they seem to think that they have a claim over those key assets, which also contradicts some of the leak things that came out as well, where Celsius said that they want to build a custody service, decentralized, maybe exempt from regulation somehow, kind of more of, you think, using that whole DeFi, CeFi narrative, and then you realize that it's not DeFi. And so, more along the same of that type of stuff. But then it was announced that there's going to be an auction of GK8. And so I think that prompted the Series B preferred to accelerate their claim over whether that is theirs. So I'm going to be sitting out on that one. I'm not a part of it. I'm not a preferred shareholder. But any votes that come through, one of the challenges with Celsius is they never gave us shareholder updates, and they did the Series B in breach of the contract without actually giving the preemption rights to their community or to our community. And so we had to, try and force that to happen. And then we ended in the DD side. And then the withdrawal suspension happened as well, as I've covered in previous things. So, we started to see that happen. What else have we got before we start to? So I covered the BF model. I think that's enough. I think that's everything I've got for you. There's actually more that happened this week, but let's use this opportunity to bring some people up onto the stage. So if you'd like to say anything, then put your hand up, Azad. We can start letting some people through.
Let's bring on Plan C to begin with, and we've got quite a few requests.
Okay, I'll just let the first person up.
Yeah, hey guys, can you hear me okay?
Hey, Plan C.
Hey,
I think you wanted to say some things. You weren't I think I got lots of messages from people yesterday that they were trying to get up on the stage, and none of them were inviting up on the stage. So there was a lot of messages I was getting from people, and I was really in the zone. I wasn't paying attention. Sorry if I didn't catch your messages. But yeah, there was definitely some curated inviting up to the stage yesterday.
Yeah, I just first of all, I just want to say thanks a lot, guys, again for doing this weekly call. It really does help, the community just have different perspectives. All these rooms, help people to kind of get different perspectives. So, yeah, thanks so much for doing this. I did listen to the interrogation last night. It is very difficult for people to understand. It's extremely difficult, to be on a stage when you have literally 20 people, basically interrogating you. It's very challenging in those situations. But I was trying to get on stage, I wasn't able to. Other people were trying to get on, they weren't able to. So, yeah, I mean, just understand for people listening, you got the same 20 people basically on stage in a room. You might have 500, 700 people listening, but I mean, it's a very intimidating stage to go into, right? When you have basically questions being formed as allegations, right? Like basically you have a lot of questions that are asked of Simon that are essentially in the question. You're insinuating wrongdoing. You're basically, they're interrogating questions. I mean, you can just go back and listen to it. The questions are essentially basically saying someone's done something wrong. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to share that. I just also wanted to add to what Simon said, basically regarding the Series B funding round. So the Series B funding round, I was here and very involved with the community during that time, and it was absolutely pitched to the community as this is a stamp of approval that you can put your life savings in Celsius. I remember being very excited about what was this announcement going to be. It was very hyped up, and then the pension fund was basically Alex's way of saying to the community, like, look, this pension fund did 8 months of due diligence on Celsius and the stamp of approval here. And so, it's completely safe to put some money into. So, yeah, that was just kind of how that was pitched. The last thing I'll just mention is just regards to the narrative around this list that I put out briefly on Twitter. So, this list was absolutely in no way intended to be. There's been a lot of basically, there's. People have basically added way more to it than it actually was. It was simply a list of people I had blocked. And I mean, I have absolutely no problem with criticism or people coming at me and giving me feedback. I have no problem with having constructive conversations. But I mean, when people attack you and essentially do it in a very toxic way, there is a line of respect. And that was crossed by numerous people in the community. So, that list was just for myself to keep track of essentially who had been extremely aggressive towards me and very negative. And, I unblocked people multiple times, giving people many chances, and it just got to the point where, I spend a lot of time on Twitter and I just don't have the time to deal with these back and forth conversations. So what I did is I made a list for myself of just people that I basically blocked. So yeah, there's people are projecting within the community, adding all these extra narratives and saying a bunch of nonsense of these people's, are not safe, and this is just Twitter handles, guys. This is not personal information. These are people that I blocked, that's it. They were very toxic towards me. I mean, I could post a bunch of tweets, I'm not going to, of some of the swearing and some of the, just memes and nonsense towards me. So yeah, that's all it is. I took it down after about 5 minutes. It wouldn't have been out there if it wasn't for people taking screenshots and then sharing it and making it into a big deal, which it's absolutely not. So yeah, I mean, I just thought the creditor community, people that, are just here to basically, just here for reasonable conversations, thought they might want to see a list of all the people that are attacking me, just so people can understand. Because people are saying like, oh, Plancy's blocking people. Well, that's only one side of the story, guys. You don't understand the kind of hate I've been getting. So again, I think the community, obviously is interrogating Simon, interrogating me. I mean, at some point, I'd like to see some interrogation of Alex on some of these Twitters, held accountable. And the absolute last thing I'll say, I'm sorry I'm talking so much, is, I mean, just regards to how we got here, it's amazing. I mean, I'm absolutely amazed when I listened to the call yesterday, how people are still questioning how we got to this point. I know we want to move on and work on solutions, but people are still questioning how we got here. People are still thinking like, oh, it's just a market downturn. All these companies failed. It's not true. Nexo never failed. You know, Crypto.com never failed. Voyager's not in a, it doesn't have nearly as big a hole as Celsius. Celsius does not have a hole because they put money into mining. The mining is an asset on the balance sheet. It has current value, probably around the same value that was put into the mining. So there's still a $2 billion hole, guys. Like, we're here because of mismanagement. I don't know how people at this point are confused. Not every centralized company in industry went under, right? Not everyone's in bankruptcy. Celsius has the biggest hole of anyone in the industry, and it was not caused by investing in the Bitcoin mining, and it was not caused by the market downturn, and it was not caused by people taking money out of Celsius. If Celsius was not insolvent, and if there wasn't mismanagement and huge mistakes made, we would not be missing $2 billion and Celsius would not be in bankruptcy. And people are saying yesterday, oh, give Alex another chance, give Celsius another chance. Well, I'm sorry, when you destroy hundreds of thousands of people's lives, or that's an exaggeration, when you destroy thousands of people's lives with their life savings, the question remains, do you get another chance? I believe in second chances, but in certain situations, I mean, we're talking about people's livelihoods here. This is not, you know, you get another chance in other scenarios where you don't have people's livelihoods at stake. So $2 billion is missing, you know, around there or whatever. And the question is, do you get another chance? You know, certain situations I would say yes, other situations I would say no. Everyone has to decide what they think. But yeah, let's go on other people. I've talked too much. But yeah, I just wanted to add those things. Thanks, guys.
Okay, thanks, Plan C. Just adding my perspective. Look, my personal style is not to block, so it's just my style. But you know, I can totally understand how blocking can kind of just you know, when it has a real effect on your psyche. You know, there's different ways of managing that, and when you find yourself obsessively on Twitter, I've had to control the amount of time that I'm spending on Twitter because since I've been involved in this. And you know, getting that right balance and time management and various other things. But you know, it's just a personal way of how you want to organize things. And also, to give a balanced perspective, I did hit pretty hard at Alex, to be fair. I was, you know, I learned from my last. I tried diplomacy, which is more in line with my personality. And then he tried to come up and just give more of the same lies to the community. And so I thought I'd, you know, try and use a slightly different approach, which is more in line with his more aggressive approach. And so I did give him a bit of interrogation, and that led to more people giving me interrogation. But we didn't get the balance, unfortunately. All right, so let's move over to other topics. So Azar, do you want to start letting a few people up?
Yep, let's bring on Eric.
Is anyone up already?
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for having me. Custody holder on Celsius, majority in custody as well as earn. Docket number 72 on the public record. Simon, I've met you numerous times, Miami conferences, Bitcoin conferences, etc. My interaction with you when we spoke was fantastic. I find you nothing but a stand-up guy. The way that you've handled yourself throughout this entire process is quite frankly commendable. You didn't go hard enough on Alex yesterday. I did buy your Bank to the Future book, so hopefully $5 or whatever goes into your pocket. I haven't read it yet. I completely disagree with your custody position, not because I am biased, because I am a custody holder. If I was completely in earn, which I was obviously previously, I would still feel that custody deserves 100% of their funds back, just based on terms of service and just how custody is understood to be defined as. With that being said, for both you and Plan C, you know, Jay-Z famously said, "Don't argue with fools," because people from a distance can't tell who is who. And yesterday, you were arguing with a bunch of fools. Plan C, you don't have to defend yourself either. Simon, never feel like, please, man, never feel like you have to spell a word to these idiots. Like, never feel like you have to do that, man. Like, you're so past that. You're such a humble dude. Like, that was just completely disrespectful. And I was just like, I can't believe Simon's doing this. I was called to the stage to speak, and I was going to say this the other day, but I just didn't feel like speaking to any of those individuals. But I do want to commend the way that you handled it, and Plan C you as well. I do have a question. I also like Sean a lot. and I commend the partnership that you have with Salt. They're awesome. To me, they were Celsius before Celsius, before Celsius convinced me and brainwashed me. With that being said, have you or Sean thought about maybe speaking to Bill at Abra? Because he seems to be doing something amazing. Maybe he would be your competitor, Simon, if you know, like in the future. I don't know, but Bill is also obviously a pretty stand-up guy, and he seems to be going down the path that if I wanted someone to take over Celsius, I feel like that would be a good direction in combination with what you're speaking about, as well as what Sean is doing as well. So I just wanted to know if you had any thoughts about Abra. Bill obviously hasn't even mentioned any of this. I don't know if he's mentioned any of it. I haven't spoke to him about it, but I feel like what he's doing in combination with what you and Sean have put together, that seems to be like the perfect fix for the situation that earn holders are specifically and potentially custody holders as well. Thanks for your time.
Okay, cool. So first to clarify, my book Bank to the Future, I've never been paid from that. So $5 won't go into my pocket.
It's like the music industry. I got you.
Literally, it will go into the publishers. And to be fair, the publisher is a boutique company, and the book business is tough. But my next book, all of the money will be going to some kind of cause to push Bitcoin adoption in Latin America. So we're just looking at causes at the moment, so just can't wait to get back to that, to be honest. It was so close, and then this happened. So that's going to be next year, so that's to look forward to. My thoughts on custody is really a strategic thought. If you have a claim on custody, I think you have a very good claim. I just think that there's Kirkland and Ellis are playing a game in order to divide and conquer the community, and we are really starting to hit that that type of frustration where you're just like, oh, screw it, let's just move to chapter 7, I've had enough. And that's when you get like releases and all sorts of stuff, and the strategy that I think is being driven to. So that's what I want to avoid. So we can't reach burnout here, and we have to focus on recovery plans, and we have to do better than chapter 7. And so in my moments, like you said, where I'm in those moments of spending time on things that aren't so productive, I just need to make sure I'm managing my time well, because I got to get the right balance between intelligence and feedback, and versus getting in an unproductive egotistical mess. And so that's what I want to try and avoid, and be a higher person where I can. So yeah, the custody side, I understand that. I don't really have a position. I just want everyone to understand prisoner's dilemma there, that everybody has been driven into these different areas. And the argument is really that, as far as I know, no one ever wanted to be in custody. They were just forced into custody. And then there's that whole 89 days, which is an interesting coincidence when it relates to the clawback side. And Kirkland and Ellis making it clear that they want to hold back funds for the clawback, meaning that there is a part of their strategy which involves not having a relationship with those. And so as we go further and further down the side, I'd be very interested to see the relationship between Kirkland and Ellis and Celsius and the board members, as that progresses and more information gets released. Sorry, what was actually the question? I can't remember. You had a question.
Sorry, yeah, no problem, man. I went on a little rant there. Don't ever spell words for anyone ever again.
Right.
But no, my question was in regard to Abra. If you've spoken with Bill,
Abra,
or
yes.
if you think they could be a potential partner, or maybe they're a competitor to what you and Salt are potentially planning.
Yeah. I don't believe in competition, and Sean and I are so ideologically aligned because Sean is a Bitcoin OG. He's been here from really early.
Yep.
And he just has, he's been of service to the industry. I don't know people like, I don't find people that say bad things about Sean, because he's always just trying to work with people. He's trying to support the industry. And he got himself, caught up in some regulatory stuff early, which hopefully might be a blessing in disguise, because what we found is that the earlier you get yourself in regulatory challenge, if you come through it, then you end up stronger on the other side, which is why I wanted to work with Sol. And plus just the whole thing of he created the market, he invented this market. And there's an element of thinking, okay, the person that created the market deserves some of the credit when regulators have kind of put them in a bit of a gag order for many years, while the industry grew so big outside of regulations, and then claimed that they created the industry as well, which I think is, I don't like that type of stuff. So that's why I wanted to, we really got our heads together and think, how can we do this now? Abra, I'm a shareholder in, so I know Bill very well. We raised finance for them on Bank to the Future, so we have a syndicate of investors, and Bill has given an indication. So he started to, and of course I spoke to him. Any way that anyone that can support creditors in getting a better result, I had all the conversations with all the people within my network that might be able to support creditors. And they made it very clear as well that this isn't about predatory offers. We've got to make sure that those people that have been that have become victims of this have to do well out of this scenario. And I gave them all my ideas of how to do well out of this scenario. And that's where the whole IOU token concept came along that we created in 2016. So Bill is, I think he may be able to play a part. Now, there's two different models emerging. So he indicated that he's looking at creating a bank. And I also spoke to some of the banks that I'm shareholders in and have funded, the crypto-friendly banks like FE Bank, who are kicking ass at the moment. They're doing their USDC integration. So excited to see, licensed banking and crypto integrations and various other custody solutions that are going to come from that, and really just learning from all this mess. What happens with these SEPA liquidations and just everyone understanding the different dynamics versus normal liquidations. And but they're going down the banking route, which I think is a very exciting path to go. But it really also depends upon the SEC's and the whole just American crypto, inquiries at the moment. So they made it very clear. There was a few things that came out this week or last week. I can't remember. It all blends into one. One of them is that they thought that if you create, as a financial institution, if you create staking products like exchanges do, then they consider that a security and an investment. So that requires the security side. They also talked about banks, if they want to get involved in the custody side, that they have to put their assets on their balance sheet as a liability. Sorry if this is really geeky, but these are the kind of things I geek out on. And by putting it as a liability, it means that they owe it to the customers, but it also triggers off their Basel requirements. And Basel means that in order to grow your liabilities, you have to back it by more deposits. And so as the price of Bitcoin goes up, for example, then you'd have to have more deposits to match that. So this is going to create a bit of an interesting model, which is why with Sean and us, we were looking at how you combine lending licenses with securities licenses in order to put together a model that is slightly more bespoke for the situation around these different scenarios. So if it turns out that the banking model is the right way to go about it, and it's also good to see these different models, it's not competition. We work together. We do integrations with anyone that they'd say, most people would say our competition. The reason we got in this mess is because we were building a security law compliant version of Celsius in partnership with Celsius. And we did a beta where we put some of our clients' retirement funds in there through our structure. And then, right prior to the withdrawal freeze, and Alex was saying he wanted us to put more of our clients' retirement funds in. And that upset me quite a lot. And so that kind of, led to that kind of me speaking out after the withdrawals were suspended. The other thing as well is the claim that I didn't put together a recovery plan. I literally, I'm sorry to say this, but the week that my father passed away, 2 days after my father passing, I came out of mourning in order to get on the phone with Celsius and their investment bank and put together a full recovery plan with the team that was presented to them. I don't think Alex ever showed any kind of, oh, I'm sorry that your father or anything like that. We presented the plan, we gave them the plan, but I'm glad that, the IOU token is really where the concept might be going, because that was part of the presentation. But watch the video today, as I said, in order to understand the importance of the equity piece. And all those Voyager people, make sure you push for the equity reorg as well, because I want everyone to get a better deal out of that. Don't let people get the predatory deal and you don't get the upside from that. That's the important piece here. Okay, so yeah, if there's a partnership with Abra, we'll continue to talk, and Sean and I will continue to work on. And if any of those solutions are useful in getting creditors a better result, then we're perfectly positioned to unify the various different players in the industry. Also, some of our other companies I've invested in, like Securitize, is a great company, great execution, great regulatory compliance, great, all these different players, and FV Bank doing what they're doing in Puerto Rico. We really have the opportunity to turn this into something very special that can really support creditors. So I just want you to know that as long as we can avoid Chapter 7, then there's plenty of things that we can do to put together a depositors first strategy, working through all those things that I talked about when we started. Sorry for speaking so long. Thank you for bringing that up.
No, I do appreciate it, Azad. Thanks for having me. You can drop me back down. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, next speaker is Amin or Amine.
Okay.
Hello. Hey, Simon, sorry to hear about your father and your loss. That's the first thing. Second, I want to, this is actually a very good development of this bankruptcy with the mining company. I think it will help kind of put a price on what is a mining company worth today from a market value perspective. And I think that will clarify things for many people. As for my question to you is, as for the preferred shareholder he had the pension fund that has a claim on the mining operation, the good thing about that from perspective of kind of a collateral effect, my question to you would be, wouldn't a pension fund that has a claim on something that destroyed many of Canadian savings would be more diligent and would be actually more willing to be part of the solution? And obviously today that's a missing piece, because that will give a lot of credibility to any restructuring plan. That's the first thing. And the second thing, let
me do one at a time, because I forget the first question when we do the second.
Yeah, me too, actually.
And so, look, this is the divide and conquer, everyone looking out for their own. Unfortunately, Alex brought in, a bunch of retirement funds into this mess. They're looking out for their own. They have their own preference. They have various other things. That will be played out in court. From a philosophical perspective, I believe that the assets would be more likely to go to creditors. But at least we get to see that in court before people spend too much time constructing recovery plans around the mining side. So the sooner that can play out, just like with the custody, we've got the October 7th hearing as well. And so hopefully that comes. But the point of this is this is getting further and further and further into looking like Mount Gox. And so we got once the exclusivity period goes, I imagine that there's going to be an extension to the exclusivity, and maybe people will file motions at that stage in order to object. We'll see where those go. But we just got to watch these different constituents play out. And it's a very important piece. If shareholders get the benefit of that mining, and you've got to also understand the disclosures around insiders' different positions. The bankruptcy process is meant to be maximized for creditors because there's a $3 billion hole. And so therefore it will be, let's see where these go. And remember, who the insiders, who's got the largest shareholdings, who's got the largest sell. I think that people should ask a lot more questions around the original ICO. I asked Alex a few questions around that. I think there's some additional interrogations and questions to be asked around that.
I think the regulators will. for
Oh,
sure.
well, yes, absolutely.
I mean, I've done ICO, so I know exactly that fear, and I know exactly how actually after we've done the ICO, we were kind of puzzled from a legal perspective, what to do, what was the level of compliance, what did we breach, what did we not.
More around
So
how much Alex invested and whether that fund's
yeah,
well invested.
that's the case of most of the guys that got caught into the ICO wave. I think that yeah, I understand your point there. And also what I also think what really kind of caught my attention today is that there was another filing of a motion of another regulator, which you didn't talk about. And I think this is an important development as well, because it's looking more onto the
Okay, I've missed that one. Have you read it? Could you give us the breakdown?
yeah. So basically, well, I don't know the information exactly, but one of the regulators filed a motion because basically he had as an argument that it was looking like there were some fraudulent behavior that happened during the exercise of Celsius. Okay, that's the idea. So
Yeah.
that's kind of very scary, and we're very sorry that actually it developed to this at this level. But yeah, but on the just I want to bring your attention to one thing, if I may. So I want to talk about the nature of the pension fund that actually invested. It's a Canadian pension fund, so they have also a stakeholder mission as well. So I don't think they will be soulless, if I may. I think Canadian pension funds know in that environment they have a mission statement that also include the well-being of stakeholders, and there are many Canadians that lost their retirement. So they were Canadian depositors.
Of course, this is the disconnect that Alex had between the people that he was misrepresenting to versus the end user. This is people's retirement here. That's no joke.
Okay. So anyways, I thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next speaker. Let's bring on.
Who'd like to come up next? I think we've got a few people up.
Irina.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me. First of all, Simon, I want to say, it's quite admirable watching you taking leadership with this with Celsius, and I'm sure a lot of people appreciate that you're spending a lot of your time and effort, although you have an interest in the company. But it's just absolutely admirable how you arguing with all the idiots, or not maybe arguing, tolerating. Can I ask like a wider Bitcoin question rather than specific to Celsius? Because
yeah, sure. Let's do that. But I do want to say, look, everyone has the right to say their things, but there's a lot of upset people. There's a lot of emotions here. There's a lot of different interests. And I just hope that in the end we end up on the same team and logic prevails. And I do believe in the end we end up on the same team. It's just kind of a natural, chaotic social media process that. That's been really it's been wild, and it's been massively disruptive towards my life. Sometimes I wonder why the hell I'm here and what I'm doing, but then I remember when people tell me their stories. So this is why these spaces mean a lot to me, because sometimes I need to remember the motivation, and when someone tells me how this has impacted their life, it kind of realigns me with why I'm doing this. But anyway, yeah, feel free. What's your question?
Yeah, absolutely. When I meant idiots, I did not mean the passionate people who lost their money. I meant like more trolls and, disrespectful people who are trolling you or others, which is because we can see that, right? We can see it from the outside. But the question was more about the wider Bitcoin situation. And like you mentioned, and I agree with you, more FUD will be coming. And we see that already from these the Greens organizations that are there to protect the environment, and how proof of work is is going to boil the oceans and destroy us all. But what I'm really scared about, and I'll explain why, is the fact that Russia is about to start selling their oil, gas, and other reserves, precious metals, etc., for Bitcoin. Because last time we had a sovereign nation trying to sell their oil for gold, that country, that the ruler of the nation, so to speak, was murdered very, very quickly, and the troops moved in to install democracy into that country. So here, what I am quite worried about, if Russia does go ahead and makes all these plans with China, with India, and with other nations to sell their reserves for Bitcoin, that there will be a lot of action from our favorite SEC and other regulators in the US trying to preserve the status of the dollar as the oil, as the reserve currency. What's your view on that? And how? I mean, I live in the Middle East, and I've seen all this Middle Eastern wars happening because of oil and because of so that for me is probably something that keeps me awake at night. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. I'm deeply concerned about the geopolitical situation because you have these 100-year cycles where an empire changes. I do believe we are in the midst of an empire change, the British Empire lasted a lot longer. The American Empire is at that stage right now where the cost of running the empire is no longer profitable without creating inflation in a very bad way. And so that is the slow demise over a couple of decade process of a change of an empire. And in the change of an empire, I tried to outline this in the monetary, a quick update on it on the money video that I released in the last couple of weeks. I can't remember which one it was. But you have a transition from fiat currency to hard money. And they normally end, these massive changes normally lead to mass conflict. And when you have mass conflict, the losing nation assumes the debt to the winning nation. And so that was what happened in the last monetary renegotiations. And then you have a new system, a monetary system being designed based around that. This is where commodities become more important. And so, having gold at your central bank has been something that China has been accumulating off balance sheet. So the actual disclosed amount of gold, held at the PBOC versus held in trust versus offshore vehicles that have been accumulating gold. I expect that China would be the buyer of any Russian gold, this is a big geopolitical situation. I did a tour across China. I can't remember when it was, maybe 7 years ago, 6 years, I can't remember, with a famous commodity investor called Jim Rogers. And Jim Rogers, he came on my YouTube channel once after we did the tour where he was saying Bitcoin's going to zero because he believed that guns and violence would not allow it to prevail, was his kind of investment thesis. And he always said to me, his wise words, as someone that's been through multi-decade cycles and seen it all before, was whenever you find yourself saying this time is different, you're probably you're probably in a bad situation as an investor. And to me, this is one of those moments where this time is different. And I say this time is different on a decade cycle. So I do believe we're at the end of a debt cycle. I do believe that the cost of living crisis continues. And I do believe that there is going to be shifts. Now, where I think this is going to be different is on the century level cycle. On the century change of empire cycle, I believe that this time it won't be a violent war. I think it will be trade war. I think it will be hacker wars. I think it will be cyber wars. I think it will be sanction wars. And I just don't believe that the integration of China, holding $4 trillion of debt in the US, and the US needing to rely upon those imports and then deglobalization, these types of trends are going to have to lead in some kind of diplomacy, as I think it will on the Celsius level. We have to end in diplomacy in the end in order to resolve this. And so, that's what I think. But at the same time, the bias that we have as humans is that we tend not to believe things that we haven't experienced before. So you can see a lot of that in Celsius, when people are saying FUD not going to happen, it's because they hadn't experienced it before. But because I've been through 3 Bitcoin 4-year cycles, I've seen, you can see the things and you believe that they can happen. No one's lived through a change of empire unless you live in a country where you've experienced things like coups and various other things, and hyperinflation destroying your wealth. And when you've experienced those things, and that's where you get these intergenerational trends. Like, my father was a lot more skeptical. He was a lot more adverse to debt because he lived through a world war. He lived through a time when savings did actually support you. He lived through a time when you could get 13% interest rate. Can you imagine getting a 13% interest rate on your cash? We can't even think of that world right now because we haven't experienced it. And so that's the real flaw in humans. We need experiential learning until we can believe something, and we don't believe it until it happens. And when it happens, it's too late half the time. So I do share your concern. I've never been through or lived through a change in empire, but the way that you study history, and this is why I'm such a monetary geek, because I believe that Jim Rogers was right. This time isn't different when you study history. And when you study history, you realize, holy shit, everything we're experiencing right now has happened many times before. And we got through it as a society. And we just simply moved from a fiat currency debt-based, whenever power and money corrupt, absolutely, and you have too many people on the wrong side of wealth inequality, you end up with revolutions and you end up with civil wars. And then those are taken advantage by external wars and external forces. And so, those were what leads to that. And you can see that it then transitions to a monetary negotiation and hard money. The one that is a real challenge for me is when I wrote Bank to the Future, I didn't call it a central bank digital currency, but I said how central bank digital currencies and modern monetary theory would be the solution to the financial crisis if you inject debt-free money into the system during a tech revolution and tech boom. And I went through the 7 technologies that would contribute to that. It really looks like central bank digital currencies are going to be that technology. On one side, it could lead to more peace because it means that we don't have to have a financial crisis and we can deleverage the system by creating debt-free money rather than allowing banks. But the cost of that, and everything's it's like Ethereum and Bitcoin scaling, the Bitcoin debate. The scaling debate was you have to give up decentralization if you want to have bigger blocks. Then you get cheaper transaction fees. What's more important? I think the block size debate was right, that decentralization was more important because it's really important technology as we go through this. So you get these like cost benefit analysis, and we have to start thinking about which ones. And so I think the central bank digital currency is going to come at the cost of freedom. And so when your bank goes bust, you're not going to give up your deposit. Instead, you're going to opt into the terms and conditions, just like with the Celsius settlement. When you take on an IOU token, you'll probably opt into the terms and conditions in order to settle. Those are how you get out of reorgs. Those are how you get out of legal challenges. And those are how the country will probably deleverage the system. And then you'll have a global level of, we already have global central bank digital currencies with SDRs. Everyone has, and that's money creation on a global scale. SDRs, they make it sound like it's backed by a basket of gold. It's actually just a bank overdraft, and it was money creation. Even on the World Bank level, the World Bank loans are often bought with bonds that were created by banks through the fractional reserve system, and therefore it led to new money. And you have economic hitmen lending companies with the power of the US dollar, that led to so much destruction and poverty in those countries, and predatory loans. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant, but yeah, I am slightly concerned about that. So I think people should be preparing. At retirementplanb.com, I said that you need to have a portfolio built around hard money, which is a Bitcoin-based strategy. And I went through the 5 different approaches that I use there in order to leverage that up and not be exposed to everything. And then a strategy that is based around the dollar and the central bank digital currency, continuing the debt-based Ponzi scheme. And then a strategy based around a change in the monetary system, which is a gold policy, a Bitcoin policy, and really making sure you can ride out those 4 to 5 year cycles and have enough income in order to not be too affected by the different trends. Okay, thank you. Let's bring someone else up.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Ron Paul.
Hey, Simon. Thanks for having me here.
Hey, Ron.
I think it was very interesting for you to mention Jim Rogers, but didn't he miss the tech innovation and just went for?
He did. He's a tech dinosaur. He couldn't use the internet. He really when we did the tour, it was the two of us. He was talking about how China and Russia are the future. He went heavy in Russia, and he invested heavy in Russian bonds and China debt as well. But I was covering the Bitcoin side, and he basically said, look, you young guys, this is the future, but America won't let it happen. Guns will stop it. And so, interestingly, your Ron Paul is where all this comes in. The Austrian economist.
Yeah. But I'm just saying that he managed to call out the food game that went with Ukraine. There's last cycle, but I think I was very interested for you to mention the convertible debt through the tech token. I do believe as well that equity has to be part of the plan. So I am going to ask you, if there was a plan that the community pushes that uses that token, that uses equity, both on the main company and on the mining company, would you, and probably a decentralization of Spell, would you support it before the period of exclusivity, if we have the community push for Celsius to implement something like that? Because I'm also in support that all Bank of the Future's investors and equity holders should be part of the plan. Of course, the main goal is to focus on secured creditors. But what is your view on that?
So it's good to see that the plan I originally proposed to Celsius is taking on new form. But I want to make sure that the equity piece is included, because that's a vital part of the economics that made it work. And so that I would certainly be pushing back against creditors not receiving equity. And what then it comes down to the quality of that equity. So what made Bitfinex work is it had a management team that could get back to operations. It had the backing of the assets that were underlying it. And so therefore, it really comes down to the quality of the assets in the equity, the ability for the equity to get back to trading, because if there's no profit, then you have got nothing to work with. I think that then gets into a regulatory conversation, and then the quality of the assets backing that, the IOU token as well. So all of those three need to be factored in, which is when my original proposal discussed new code, new management, new risk model, and new licenses and regulations to avoid Chapter 7.
I have some more questions. What do you think? Is it possible? One thing I really disagree is equity that you cannot have vote. Is it possible to retroactively give that vote back to the shareholders, or do a sort of revamp of equity? I'm for that. I think I'm for that Alex continues to have the voting power, but I think everyone should have a voting. And in theory, it happened with Google, you can have the CEO not have the majority of the share, but still have the majority of the vote. What do you think of that? Just to preserve the ethos, what is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's many ways of using corporate governance structures. So you have decisions are made by boards, and boards in public companies need to be held accountable to a corporate governance structure. If the shareholders don't like the decisions that the board is making, then every shareholder has one vote if they've got voting shares. You can then make different classes of shares and those different classes of shares can come with different levels of votes and rights and various things. So we've seen that with the ordinary shareholders and also the preference shareholders. So it's a legal question. Legalese can be used. There's lots of different ways of implementing different corporate governance structures. But also, it's about there's several things need to be considered. It's the lawsuits of the existing equity, it's the regulatory and ability to get back to trading, and those are factored in the new conversation. Then if you're going to come back with a new risk model, then you've got to also have new licenses. And then you've got to have a management team that could support that in the way of being fit and proper. And so all of those need to be addressed in a reorg plan once you've got the structure right.
Just more one thought. What do you think of using like Cell? You know that Celsius has a lot of Cell on the treasury. There are some doubts about the centralization. So what do you think of like airdropping equitably to every user with over $100 and use that Cell token as a sort of voucher for you to acquire some equity on the company? Because that will like give an opportunity for everyone to trade maybe in app, even through swaps or something like that. It would add an intrinsic value that could be tied to the success of the company and the full solvency. It will also like promote removing Cell from the market. So then you could relaunch it, because I think there probably needs to be a relaunch of the token for you to preserve the value, and if you want to pay back like lots of people were liquidated and Celsius incurred that loss, so they kept the Cell. But if you're going to launch that Cell into the market, if you still have the Cell and the company is not full solvency, you open for the people to get again liquidated.
I get it, Rod. We'll take that as the last question, just because there's other people that want to come to the stage. My opinion on Cell token is it's an absolute regulatory liability, and there's been all sorts of actions that I think are going to be released in future motions and objections. And I think it's a real hindrance on the process of avoiding Chapter 7. That's my personal opinion, just due to some of the things that come behind that token. So as more and more gets revealed and more comes out, I think any proposals around that, I think it's going to be very hard for the judge to understand them. And the reality is, if you want to use a token for voting rights, you can just create that token. You can create it as a compliant security. You can do everything right and use this opportunity to do things right in the first place. But diluting votes with people that already have the token, that have been, buying and selling it outside of the platform, plus the distribution from existing people, then the treasury. If you wanted to use votes, then just distribute it in the way it needs to be. And then you've got to ask yourself, do you need decentralization for such a thing? Because you've already got all the data of all the users, you know who all the creditors are. I know there's a lot of issues with the KYC, and that the KYC needs redoing because many people didn't have the correct KYC. So that's a challenge as well. People always think that blockchain is needed when you need decentralization. If you don't need decentralization, then you have a very expensive, inefficient database that is actually one of the most expensive ways of transacting. And so when you can use a centralized database, it's a much more cheaper and more efficient way of doing things, unless you want to pay the cost for decentralization. And with Bitcoin, of course, you want decentralization because that's the only reason it exists today. And so I'm not sure whether it's needed as a use case, but if there's an efficiency improvement, then great. And then you might as well just do a custom process rather than take all these legacy issues over, which I think increases the likelihood of ending up in Chapter 7. Okay, next question.
Next speaker is Ryan.
Hello. Anyone want to speak?
Can you hear us? Or Kronos?
I'll let some more people up if people with their hands up don't want to speak. Okay, we've got someone.
Hello, this is Kronos. Thank you very much for hosting this.
Sorry, I think two people were
Alex.
speaking at the same time.
Yeah, this is Ryan. Sorry.
Hey, Ryan.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to just thank you for all your efforts in what you're doing, and yeah, just kind of seeing the to encourage the community to use discernment in this issue, because what people need to realize is that Alex, like the lady who came on yesterday after the call and was comparing this to a marriage and saying, watch over, be careful what we're doing because it's about the kids. Well, this wasn't a marriage. You weren't a co-partner in the decisions of the company. You don't share in getting us in this spot. Alex himself, one who created this hole, to where now we're trying to figure out how to get out of it. And just the community needs to use discernment in realizing that this is what happened. Like, don't put that same guilt on people who are now trying to come up with ideas, versus realizing that they need to understand that Alex is the one who made those decisions that got us here. And I get it. People don't want to just blindly trust anybody anymore. And I agree, but they need to realize that to attribute default blame to you as well, almost like you're part of the marriage that got us here, is an incorrect way of looking at it. You need to use discernment and actually encourage people to plan. But yeah, I wanted to say that because after hearing that whole call yesterday, it was just very disheartening to see the equal parent in this problem that got us to this issue of divorce. And it was just a horrible analogy to realize that you weren't part of that plan. It got us into trying to contribute plans to get us out. And great, we're not going to just trust it blindly, but we're going to need to realize that not all information is going to be out in the open before we can agree to go a direction. And that's just how part of this plan works. But that's where being able, without all the information, is going to be needed. So I just wanted to say thank you for doing that. And you took a beating yesterday. This is not a marriage. You were not co-marriage getting us to this part.
Yeah, okay, thanks for pointing that out, Ryan. From my side, when I don't have my more finer moments, it's because I'm reflecting upon the fact that, it upsets me. I was lied to, I was stolen from, and then rather than coming up and apologizing and try and put things right, I was being blamed for causing the problem. And I don't want to come across like a victim. I'm my own person. I can stand up to myself. I'm all good. But it's just kind of a reflection of the character that if I had caused someone such financial loss and lied so aggressively and then tried to get them to fix my problem by putting more money in when I knew that there was a big problem, I don't think I'd be coming back and trying to aggressively make them look like it was their fault. And that's just really an indication of character and a reminder to me that although my default position is diplomacy, sometimes the only way to actually go at a bully is to hit back. And sometimes I have to remind myself of that as well. So thank you, Ryan.
Thanks. The next speaker
I think
is
David Adler came up. Is that you, David?
Yeah, David.
Hi, everyone. I just joined. I was on a little bit earlier, but I had to get off for a 12:30 call. But I'm here if anyone wants to talk about stuff. I haven't heard the last 45 minutes of discussion, but what's the topic spin of conversation?
Okay, well, we'll leave you up here if anyone wants to ask questions and you want to add a legal perspective on any of these things.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay, let's bring up Kronos.
Okay, who'd else like to come up?
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Simon, for hosting. In regard, shifting gears a little bit to Voyager, the company's ethos was crypto for all, with a very promising future, probably one decision away from, becoming a household name. I have a paramount concern, and that goes into the current people that are bidding for the company. For an industry that claims to want to be for adoption of cryptocurrency, I fear that they're doing a great deal of harm by their bids and their behavior, one and foremost. So from a stockholder perspective and a Voyager token holder perspective, what is, in your opinion, a likely outcome? What can the community do in order to better the chances of recuperating 100% or whatever the percentage is moving forward? And would appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So for those of you not too familiar with the Voyager situation, I tried to share with people what's happening with the bids with certain information so that people could understand what to prepare for. There's certain information that I can't release, there's certain information I could, so I released what I could. There are three companies bidding, which is the Wave Financial in a partnership with, I think it's, I've forgotten the name now, Chain Financial or something. Someone will remind me and correct it. I put a tweet thread out. Binance and FTX, and all of those have interesting politics to discuss. Then let's talk about what can be done next. So the first thing is, Binance's bid. Let's get back to the geopolitical. So firstly, US interests are using geopolitics to implement glorified racism in order to say that it's a national security risk that CZ, because he comes from China, I was at the Chengdu meeting when he originally came up with the idea for the BNB token, and then created it within a couple of weeks and then launched it. That's being used as a national security risk to try and prevent them, Binance, from being involved. I don't like that type of stuff, but maybe intelligence know more than me. Every time I tried to bring CZ into these processes, it was more around how to put together a restructure that would support creditors more. So I'd like to see more offered to the creditors, because if the equity holders of the existing company, i.e. Binance or FTX, end up with the assets that only cover the cost of all of the lawyers and all of the investment bankers and all the accountants and all the auditors, then I see that as a shafting for creditors. And so what I think needs to happen from here is, so the auction has happened, and I'm not a lawyer, but I'd like to see a competitive reorg happen from the debtor. If the debtor pulls through on that, then I'd like to see counter offers from either Binance or FTX offering up equity in their company in order to try and get a more competitive scenario. And what I'd really like to see out of this process is that there's a new, UCC, their job is not just to get, the best outcome for creditors, but I think there should be some way of making it where the UC's job is actually to stretch the barriers of innovation in order to fill the hole, not just get the easiest process. And now there's a bit of subjective decision making there, but I wanted to try and impact my experience to see if we can, give them some ideas, and then the legal process will work itself out. So I would definitely be pushing the UCC. I know they have more town halls on the Voyager side than you get on the Celsius side. I'd like to see Celsius UCC do more interaction and more engagement as well. I'm sure they're listening to these things, but I think there needs to be a bit more accountability there. So I'd be, if I were involved in that game, and I've got no axe to grind or skin in the game other than trying to get a better result for creditors, I'd be looking to push the company to do a reorg, and the UCC to put together some additional process where you either get equity in Binance, you get equity in FTX, or you get equity in the new reorg structure through some kind of IOU token as well with Voyager. So that's what I think needs to be next. But remember, in bankruptcy, and David could speak to it as well, unfortunately, it's always the lawyers that get paid, because these things don't happen unless motions are filed thoughts are coordinated and put into more language that's receptive to the cause. And so, more ad hoc groups coming together in order to fund what's needed. Because if there's no motion, then it's just all of us speaking on Twitter to each other, as opposed to something going to happen. The FTX side as well. FTX was a creditor at the same time as a shareholder. I just think it's time to stand up and deliver. If you come from the perspective of, we're the company that's doing right by the for the community, and you want a relationship with those people, then make them whole. And I don't mean make them whole by paying cash, because a bad investment is a bad investment. But use some of your other assets and get a bit more innovative. Put down earn-out structures or equity or various other instruments that you could use, which happens typically in M&A deals when you want to motivate the management team to be motivated. You put together earn-out structures. So I'd like to see what those look like, and we'll see in the future.
Yeah, this is David Adler. I'll just add to that. Obviously there's a lot of ideas that get sent out on Twitter, and many of them are great ideas, but for the process, it's meaningless unless there's something before the court to consider. And there was yesterday someone who posted, can we circulate our proposed plan amongst ourselves to try and, in Celsius, to try and get the debtor to come out with their proposed plan? And I, don't generally write back on these things, but I wrote back on this one saying that it's a very, very tricky process, and I would not recommend that, because this whole notion of the debtor has exclusivity for 120 days to file a plan. I suppose under the language of the statute, it doesn't prevent you from circulating a plan, but there is an absolute prohibition of soliciting votes on a plan. So many, many years ago, actually before I was even a lawyer, back in 1988, there was a case that went up to the Third Circuit, which is basically Delaware and New Jersey, where the court said, where someone had circulated a plan that had not been approved by the court, or a disclosure statement accompanying the plan. And there's a whole fight that broke out. And the Third Circuit said, yeah, what this creditor did, and by the way, the bankruptcy court had found it to be an illegal solicitation, sanctioned the creditor. On appeal, it got reversed. And the Third Circuit then affirmed that reversal, saying what the creditor did, didn't rise to the level of solicitation or going beyond 1121 of the Bankruptcy Code, which is who can file a plan. But, it's a close call. And I said at the same time or right afterwards, that I remember sitting in a hearing way back when, this is in the early 90s, with Pan Am. And the creditors of Pan Am were trying to get together to put out a plan. And there was some person who said, Judge, we can just circulate the plan to whomever we want, as long as we're not filing it. And I remember it was Judge Blackshear who said, you can't do that in the Second Circuit, meaning Southern District of New York. So I don't know the cases off the top of my head about, plans and who can, what counts as solicitation, what counts as, violating 1121. But, it's that type of stuff where, there are good ideas on Twitter, but I have to say sometimes that, you can't take it too far, because you're that one's very close to the line. And I frankly don't know the answer. If someone were to circulate a proposed plan on Twitter for Celsius, whether that would be deemed a violation of 1121 of the Bankruptcy Code and 1125. So I think it's, you got to, again, as Simon said, you need lawyers to make things happen.
Thanks, David. And just for the record, David Adler or his organizations are not my lawyers.
Right.
You are involved in certain supporting certain interest groups around loans. Is that correct?
That's correct. I represent the borrowers. I don't have any connection with Simon. I think this is the third time I've been I've spoken to Simon in total. The first time was on a Twitter space about a month ago.
Yeah, and my council are busy doing the work rather than being actively involved on the public side as well, because we want to make sure that we're following the correct processes, not the processes that would destroy our plan, that people are trying to drag us down. Okay, who else would like to come up?
Let's bring on VDG.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you for the space. So I had two questions, actually. One is about Celsius, one is about Bitcoin. I'm going to start with the Celsius one because, it's very clear to me that the solution to this whole debacle is to just a new company with the part of the business that actually works, like the loan business, the staking business, and of course the licenses and regulation to make everything work. Plus, obviously, equity or something else of value to cover the whole for customer. And however, what I'm seeing from the Celsius management, from what they are publishing around, is that they are actually pushing for different things. Like instead of trying to fix what they have and get the licenses going to make it work, they instead are talking about DeFi platforms, use tokens without equity, and it is are they doing this because they don't have the licenses, they want to get them, they are just trying to not give equity to people? It's just not clear to me why there's they are doing different things, proposing different things instead of what would make sense to do in this occasion.
Okay, yeah, I'll answer that one. So there's speculation on why, I believe that either there's delusion, or there's a deliberate strategy that supports self-interest, and Kirkland and Ellis's goal, and the things that they brag about on why you should engage them, is that they get their clients releases, and that's their kind of they're what they're famous for, and so they drive a strategy that gets the optimum release. And so there's a number of different ways of achieving that, and they'll have whatever their strategies are to achieve that. So that's one of the things. The other thing is that there. So what do we know? What we know is that on the 21st of September, the UCC confirmed that they have not received a plan from Celsius. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. That's just what they said in their emails. And when Alex Majinsky's plan was leaked, they also said that they didn't back the plan, despite the fact that Alex said that they did back the plan. So those are the two things that we know, that on the 21st of September, even though Alex said he had submitted the plan and demanded us to do the same, that it's not, the UCC said in an email that they haven't received a plan, or it's not been submitted. And so, this is what upset me the most, that he broke his silence against his lawyer's advice, obviously, and he used that as an opportunity to be the same old Alex and just lie and attack, and rather than actually, and everything that he said has been disproven so far. So, I was hoping that we were going to see a different approach and a different person that's learned from the lesson, but it seems like the strategy is double down, double down, double down, double down. And I'm just hoping that doesn't lead to Chapter 7. That's my wishes. That's the thing that I think, if we ended up with months and months and months of hope, I think it's soul destroying for people. I'm really, really do feel sorry for this emotional roller coaster, this circus that we have to go through. I'm sorry for, every time we tweet something, people are up, people are down, emotions are high, emotions are low. I'm just really sorry for that's how this process is going, but it is how it's going. And I hope that these spaces, at least, if there's any beauty that's come out of this, is the community that's been built around these spaces. is hopefully when we speak to each other rather than tweet each other, we tend to get back to some level of insanity at the, sanity rather at the time, or other spaces like the one last night drove me a little bit to insanity, and not let's make sure we're the best we can be, because we need to in order to get through this. What's the second question?
Right. Yes, I completely agree with you. It's a bit of a clown show, but at least there's you. There's a lot of people that have shown what the true community is, and it's not token cultists. So the second question is about Bitcoin, and my doubt with Bitcoin are actually about its potential for adoption globally, because I've been reading and watching a lot of the innovation, like in blockchain, in the recent years, and I've been seeing that. Like most protocols are trying to be profitable and functioning today, no matter what kind of budget they have and what total value they have. With Bitcoin, right now there is inflation covering the security, but it seems that the survivability long term is going to be given either by two things: either the continuous appreciation in price, so more people coming in continuously, or both, or the fact that the energy or assets, resources used to mine it and secure the network are going to become cheaper and inexpensive, like, for example, waste energy and so forth. And I want some clarification on that, because it seems to me that there is no idea how it's going to survive, like it's a bit given to the future, or it's more like let's go forward, let's see what happens, and then we'll fix it. But the problem is, what happens is when you fix it, you have to change the monetary policy, and the entire thing doesn't make sense anymore. Thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, okay. So the first thing to say is, if Bitcoin ever changes its monetary policy, Bitcoin's over. And that would be a change to the world. Fortunately, it's impossible to do, because the difference between Ethereum and Bitcoin is that Bitcoin's impossible, really, really, really hard to change unless there's a major, major consensus. And so, whereas Ethereum is, it was optimizing for a different user case rather than, hard money. And so therefore it was easier to change. And you had, in the early days, rolling back the chain when the Ethereum Foundation founders lost money, and that led to forks, and Ethereum Classic being the original Ethereum was Ethereum Classic. The Ethereum you had before the merge was actually a fork of the original Ethereum. And then you had, now we've got the proof of stake side. So the future of Bitcoin is obviously transaction fees, because the block rewards disappears at some stage. We've still got a long way to go, but almost all of the rewards and all of the Bitcoins have already been mined. There's a few million left to go. So the future has to be transaction fees. Now, this really comes down to an understanding of Austrian economics versus Keynesian economics. So Austrian economics believes that when you have the ability to save in money that doesn't require you to speculate in order to outperform inflation, you have a wealth effect. And when you have a wealth effect, the wealthier you become, the more you spend into the economy. And when you spend more into the economy, you're able to continue to save. And therefore, you're able to speculate because you can take higher risk with your money. And so then it goes into investments. Keynesian economics is the opposite. Keynesian economics says you continually inflate away your money in order to increase the velocity of money. And velocity means that it's circulating through banks and it's creating more and more tokens. And the value of it goes down, and therefore you supplement through debt. And because the value of it goes down, you're more incentivized to spend it. And when you're more incentivized to spend it, then you have an effect of that. But and so it's just really the different types of use case. So this is why fiat currency plus hard money coexists, because fiat currency is very good for having goods that are priced in something short-term stable, which fiat currency does well, unless you're at the end of a debt cycle and going through hyperinflation. And hard money does very well at allowing you to have a mechanism for savings without additional speculation. And then as you generate wealth, you speculate further into the investment bucket. And so those two things coexist very well. And so you don't, the bit that people get confused with is they try to optimize for both hard money and fiat currency within the same protocol. And remember, Gresham's law states that good money crowds out bad money. And so you will always spend your bad money before. This relates to the Celsius use case, right? So in the Celsius motions, they filed that firstly, they want to sell their Bitcoin. So they want to sell the hardest form of money in order to invest in Alex Mashinsky's new startup. And then they filed a motion to sell USDC. So they want to take the fiat currency and sell that, but they don't want to sell the assets which are much lower down the chain in order to fund their new startup. And so at the end of that cycle, you've got the one that's the most questionable, which is Cell Token. And so, rather than using Austrian economics of preserving the hard money and using Gresham's law, we're doing reverse Gresham's law in fiat currency and Keynesian economics of keeping the lower assets and then selling off the pristine assets in order to double down, which I think is, a very unfortunate strategy. And unfortunately, us as creditors are being forced to invest in that. So that's one of the challenges. So hopefully you can see the parallel in the corporate world and that. So in summary, hard money is optimized to be hard money, and fiat currency is optimized to be fiat currency. And the more you print a fiat currency, the faster it goes down in value over time, all things being equal. And the harder the money, the more fixed the supply, which is why you focus on decentralization. So governments can never shut down Bitcoin. You spend it less, but you generate a wealth effect. And this is why I did like Celsius's business model, because you can then borrow against your Bitcoin fiat currency and put it in the bucket of investment bucket, but not put all of your eggs in one basket through misrepresentations. So I'm hoping that every single person on this call learns that lesson. And if we can get the optimum recovery, starts doing diversification, asset allocation, and money optimization, that would be an awesome result for all of us.
Okay, next speaker is
who'd like to come up next?
Liquid.
Hey guys, so I two questions, one for Simon and one's going to be for Dave, if that's possible.
Yep.
Go for it.
Okay, so the first question, Simon, on the tweets you put out yesterday on the Voyager auction process, were you referring basically to the Wall Street Journal article, or did you actually reach out to your own sources?
Can you remind me what tweet it is? I'm not quite sure. I put quite a few out.
There was like 5 or 6 tweets. It was referring to the auction.
Sources that were publicly available enough in order to be able to release them. Don't ask me any more questions.
Okay, yeah, that's the thing. I'm just curious, okay, I got you. So the second one for David is, after the Wall Street Journal article was put out about the auction leaking and everything, the UCC for Voyager put out a tweet basically stating that everybody's under an NDA and don't believe really anything you're seeing in the news. What would your opinion be on that, with like people leaking information?
I'm not involved in Voyager, so I really can't comment. But let me say this: I don't believe that. Well, let me put it this way: leaking stories is part of life. People put out misinformation. I don't know whether it's an accurate leak or not, or whether it's just misinformation being thrown out there. So I don't have an opinion on that.
Gotcha. And last one, Simon, were you able to reach out to the UCC?
Yeah, that's a process in motion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
Hey guys, I think it was me. I think it was me. I believe I was next. If I wasn't, then you could. Gosh, Simon, when you talk, I just want to keep talking financial theory with you. We could talk for hours, but it's not going to be good for the audience if we talk too long about that. A couple of things. Just one quick comment. There was a woman who made that comment about divorce, and I think it was an analogy meant to be taken loosely, not literally. It's more epistemological contextualism instead of epistemological literalism. And so she has a big heart. She has children. And so she was using that analogy for the purpose of expressing that the community is struggling. So I just wanted to defend her first. Secondly, for the purpose of having common ground, I think between all the camps within Celsius, you mentioned that it's a process right now reaching out to Voyager, the UCC. And could you do that with the Celsius UCC as well? You mentioned earlier to be able to have more of a conversation with the community about what's going on and their thoughts, and perhaps even a town hall. Is that possible for you to just ask that?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course I will.
Awesome. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. I wanted to talk more about financial theory maybe later, but thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
Next
Okay,
speaker
who would like to go
is
next?
Kisto.
Hello,
Hey.
I'm next.
Are you there? Yeah, you currently just said Alex. Okay, if you don't say something now, then we'll go over to someone else.
Let's bring on
Okay.
Keystones. Keystones, can you hear us?
Who's next?
Or Jenkins?
Hi. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you well.
Cool. I had just some like two suggestions and then a question on the feasibility of it, to, I guess, break the deadlock that I'm seeing more in the Celsius spaces. The one thing that was already mentioned, I think, should be a more equitable way of selecting speakers in those spaces. Because as an outsider looking in, I see that on every other metric, if you look at other videos, Twitter polls, Twitter feeds, it would seem that a lot of people do not share the opinions that seem to get brought to the forefront in those spaces. And it would seem that the speakers that you see are always the same spaces, so like Cellcat, Cryptosexual, Shark, just to name a few. So if there was a way to host those spaces so that the community is better represented in the questions asked, would be a suggestion of mine. Like have a random name picker or something that everyone agrees that the viewpoints that come to the forefront are like equally sampled, would be, I guess, a good suggestion to move it along, because it would then force everyone to confront the true numbers. Because now it seems that, from what I can see, vocal minority gets its viewpoint stronger across, because I don't know if it's the Twitter UI that you just see the people you follow the most on top, so they get easily pulled to the
Hey,
to the
Simon,
stage. I don't know
can I
what's behind it
interject
all.
here? Could I interject real quick? Jenkins, would you be willing to host a space to see what you want to see happen? I think that
Yeah,
might be the best idea, because if you host the space, you're going to be able to direct the conversation. I just wanted to say that, just for everyone's sake.
I would gladly help. I'm just an outsider looking in. I have a friend that lost some money on Celsius, but I'm just a physics teacher and a researcher.
I'm a teacher too, but I think if you host a space and get people to come on your space, you can direct the conversation the way you'd like to have it done. And so I think that'd be a good idea.
Yeah, and one thing I'll just say about what we do, I don't know, Azad, you can say maybe what you're doing, but I just literally have a request list and I just press tick in order, and that's it. That's as sophisticated as it gets, and I think maybe you can see that there is. I don't think we've got the same people speaking again. I mean, we've obviously got, lots of different people that have been involved in giving the content. So obviously, like Thomas and Plan C. Plan C was the first person I met from the community that supported in trying to help me understand what I'd missed. And David put his hand up to kind of give some support on different interest groups. And Thomas was just a breath of fresh air to me. Thomas was just really, really helping the community. And so they kind of got that. And then everyone else can just step up and say what they need to say. And if someone becomes really, really destructive and the conversation goes in a bad way, then we try and prevent that. But we haven't had to do much of it. Okay, well, did you have a question?
Yes, and the question was because if there's a way to also get like a way to poll the when you see like debates, for example, presidential debates, you can always they do like a poll. You can see the percentages and maybe shifting. So there would be, I think, what would be productive for both sides of the debate, if that after like a moderated debate in a more professional way, that more like double standards come to the forefront. Look, so I'll give two examples and then ask my questions. I think I just need 1 more minute. For example, one of the double standards I saw yesterday was when the consensus on the stage was that it was bad form to attack Alex because he can't defend himself because he's legally tied by his lawyers. But when you say that you can't say certain things because legal process, it is like held against you, and that was like the whole consensus on the stage. Or for example, when Otis says just to trust him because he's incorruptible. For example, I do not know who he is. I've never seen his face before, so and that gets accepted like, okay, he's ironclad, his guarantees. So I think a moderator, and if there was some feasible way to like get a visual of the sentiment of the room, I guess should also help things along, like they do in the presidential debates, because then you would get people like, for example, asking more critical questions of the other side as well, like couldn't they have ulterior motives, like pumping their own Celsius bags and stuff like that? But I feel the questions are mostly one-sided in those debates. So I guess if you see a way of technologically moderating it, visualizing the consensus in the room, and also maybe separating the votes by actual Celsius holders, like people have to dox themselves maybe, so you get real holders versus just maybe general listeners in the room. If you see any technology capable of achieving that and maybe making the debates a bit more productive. That was my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think those are all really interesting points. Definitely not my area of expertise. So if someone has anything to add there, I think everything you said made sense. It's just not my area of expertise. I'm a finance guy that had to find technology because finance became technology rather than technology guy that found finance. And so I think that all makes sense. Here's an interesting thought just to put out there to you, to the community. There's a debate happening in court around protecting the privacy of the creditors. And one suggestion from Celsius was to attach a unique identifier to each user rather than publishing their name and balance. The court and the judge seems to be favoring name and balance, but retracting address, phone number, and email. But if that unique identifier system that's being proposed by Kirkland Ellis and the debtor, maybe that could be used as some kind of voting mechanism using identifiers and balances. I don't know. But it would be good to, if that technology does get developed, then maybe that could be used as a mechanism. Obviously, the challenge is that the debtor would control that. But at the same time, I know some people have lost trust. But if you lie in these processes, that's a pretty serious thing to do. So, maybe that would be a useful thing to get a true reflection. And there's so many people that just aren't on Twitter. We're just a bunch of crazies, right, on Twitter, but the normal people aren't here. And there's so many people that just haven't had the ability to have these conversations and understand what's going on. And hopefully we can figure that way. And Celsius has a monopoly on emailing them at the moment. But that's just the nature of the situation. Thank you. I'm going to do a hard stop in about, where are we? I was going to do on the hour. So I'm going to do a hard stop in about 10, 15 minutes. No, I've got another 5 minutes, actually. Sorry, I do have a booking. So let's take, I can see 4 hands up. Should we just do, I see 5 hands up. Plan C, did you want to say something? Or?
Yeah, mine's really quick. I just wanted to give an offer to anyone in the community that wants to host a space. I can be the host. I will unblock everyone I've blocked right before the call. So anyone that wants to do a neutral space, I will not speak at all during the entire call. anyone that wants to be co-host, I'll basically make anyone that wants to run a neutral room, they can be co-host. I won't speak. I'll unblock everyone, and then they can basically have more eyeballs to have a room that they can operate themselves. They can be co-hosts. They can control the room. So I just want to give that offer out to anyone in the community that's looking to host a room that's more neutral, have more eyeballs, and have more people join. I'll just join, but I won't talk.
Cool. Okay. Next, we've got 4 people with their hand up.
I'll go.
Hey, Norman. Is that Norman?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I want to add a little humor to this situation.
Oh, please do. I'm not very
First of all,
funny. I'm really dry.
Well, before I'll give you the subject, and people can look it up if you never heard of it, because when I grew up as a kid, we played a little game called Simon Says. And I don't know how many people know that game, probably not many. But look that up in the meantime. I'm going to tell David I have something in common with you, David. I was in that Pan Am lawsuit. I was clawed back from a payment that Pan Am made to me years ago when I sold them the antivirus. That's when I learned about the 90-day rule of preferences. What a pain in the neck, but I got lucky on it. Anyway, I'll get back to Simon. Okay, so Simon, when I was a little kid, and I think most Americans, at least my age, which is probably close to your father's age, was learned a little game as a kid that was called Simon Says. And the game was like this. You said to the other person, Simon says, brush your teeth. And that meant the other person has to go brush their teeth. And we learned that as a kid. So ingrained in our mind is to do whatever is said when someone says Simon Says. So there's probably a number of regulators and probably a number of people you'd like to get some idea across. I'm just going to suggest you say Simon Says before the request. It might work. Who knows?
Thank you very much for saying that. I hope I'm not that much of a dictator or anything, but I do remember the game. Simon Says, but I do believe everyone should not just blindly do what I say. They should look into these things, and that's part of the process. But thank you for bringing a bit of humor to that as well. Thank you.
Guys, just a quick one, please, on the offer to organize spaces. Whenever probably you see fit, I would like to organize a space around the technology to be able to cast that vote that you talked about. We happen to build something like that basically broadcast real world data into a blockchain and integrate it into a DAO environment. Probably discussion is too early, but I'm happy to host a technical space just to see from a use case what can we provide.
Yeah, wouldn't it be cool if we ended up with an awesome technical solution at the end of this?
We are tech guys, so why not? This is a tech environment.
Can I go next?
Go for it, yeah.
One other quick comment. Can I have one other quick comment?
I just have a question for Simon before he leaves.
All right.
Yeah, there's a bit of noise in the background, but you go for it.
Sorry, who's coming up next?
Who was next?
Muted. We've got Sean Owen's business partner from Salt Lending. Let's see.
I don't know what happened there. Is someone?
Yeah, hello. Is that Don't Get Mad, Get Salty? You're next.
Okay, I think
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, Simon. Hey, guys. This is Ben Yablon. I'm co-founder at Salt with Sean. So.
Oh, hey.
Hey.
Oh, come on.
I joined Twitter specifically so that I could tune in and follow you, Simon. And it's a pleasure to get to jump in and share some thoughts. Specifically, I wanted to say that from Salt's perspective, this has been a long time coming. We knew early on that regulation was going to be a key part of the space, and we watched with bated breath as dramatic mistakes were made by our competitors, and here we are. So I just want to say firmly that I plan to be available and able to answer questions as and when, and really impressed by the way the community is coming together and really responding correctly to what is truly a debacle, something that should have been avoided, something that clearly was not avoided. But together, I think we can sort a way through this and arise significantly stronger than we were before.
Awesome. Thank you for stepping up. And if anyone wants to ask Salt more questions, then you know who to follow.
Well, look, if you look at my profile picture is actually the same profile picture that Alex had for many years. And it's a picture of me looking at Alex with complete confusion. This is at consensus, right as Alex's web begins. And, full circle, that's now my profile picture.
Okay, thank you for sharing that.
Good question, because I just don't know how the process exactly works. So isn't there like a time for you to present a better plan before it goes to chapter 7? You know what I mean? Even if they try to do some stupid stuff that the judge might just say, okay, it's not going to work, let's go to chapter 7. Isn't there a time for you to put in your plan and say, okay, why don't we take Simon's plan, because looks like this actually will work?
So I'll answer what I can. If somebody wanted to submit a plan, then they would need to go to engage with Celsius during that exclusivity process. And Celsius have engaged an investment bank in order to work that. If you were to do that, my belief is that you might need to sign an agreement that would prevent you discussing that. And then if you weren't getting the result that you wanted in terms of the information that you needed, then you should probably engage with the UCC, who have also signed an agreement that will prevent them saying certain things. But the UCC you're paying for in order to support you in trying to get what you want and get that process through. It's a very delicate process. But I strongly, if you engage counsel, and unfortunately, it's an expensive process. So I'm led to believe that if you engage counsel, then they would guide you on the process and suggest to you not to release a plan during this exclusivity period. There's various reasons for that, why you wouldn't do it publicly in order to prohibit. And so if a debtor, for example, was asking you to do that, then they might have an alternative agenda in order to sabotage such a process for alternative reasons.
So because you've been attacked yesterday all about this whole show your plan, show us your plan. So maybe a couple of lawyers that are knowledgeable, and I know one of them just spoke today about why not release the plan, should put like a post somewhere that you can always point somebody not to answer the same question millions of times. Like, look, this is the process. I can't sacrifice, what I'm trying to do by releasing the plan. And doesn't matter what Alex says, here is the law, and just go read up on it. Maybe that's what will help, because they keep attacking you about why don't you release a plan, why you have all the knowledge, why it can't be done, but they keep bringing the same thing. And, I just noticed the one lawyer today said why not release the plan, and you also saying right now. And I think it's just not fair that they keep bashing you on something that they have no clue that it can't be really done. And now I understand why.
Okay, thank you. And I do want to say there was a time and a place where I cared nothing more about than supporting Celsius in order to implement a recovery plan. And during that time and space, my father passed away, and a couple of days later, I came out of mourning in order to present that plan and give them all the resources that they need in order to execute that plan. But unfortunately, there were disclosure requirements in order to execute it, and those disclosure requirements couldn't have been met. And so, read into that as you choose. And so then we entered into another process, which then entered into another process. All I would leave people with before we end is that a commitment that I make to everyone on this call is that if for any reason I end up owning a bunch of assets that make me money at the expense of creditors, then you should really call me out. You should really, troll me forever, and you should probably never use any of my services in the future, because if I ended up doing that, it would go against what I actually said I was originally doing. And I think that I'd be the least popular person, probably next to Alex, that caused this mess in the first place.
Yeah, thank you very much for explaining.
Okay, cool. Right, that's the hard stop. So really appreciate that. We'll be back next week. After this, I'll start to schedule it in as well, so we can do it next week. And I hope you like the format. If you've got any feedback on the format, then just tweet me. And I try and give a few things like this crypto space, man, this Bitcoin space. Ever since I got involved, it has just been an absolute roller coaster ride. No one ever said it was going to be easy, but separating, government and money and banks and money, it was never going to be an easy journey. It affects you as an individual. It affects companies that have been and sharing this journey, and it's starting to affect countries as well. So keep, there is a much, much, much more important thing. And that is that we have the opportunity for everyone in the world, every company in the world, and every country in the world to build a plan B and have money they can own, money they can spend, and money that has a fixed supply that I think has profound impact. And everybody should keep building. Everybody should keep embracing this, and everyone should fight the good fight because there's going to be a lot of people that don't want this to happen. The content that I have been giving has been consistent from way before I ever had a business. And if you look at my books, if you look at the content, if you look at my 2-decade journey in trying to have an impact in the financial system, you'll understand that I'm not just creating these narratives in order to push people in a certain direction. I live, breathe, eat, shit this stuff. And I believe that we are changing the world, and you are all a part of it. This is an important part of the chapter. This is going to be, one of the most interesting and exciting times in financial history. And this is going to go down in economics textbooks and business textbooks in the future. And you are a part of it. And everyone should figure out how to implement their own individual recovery plan. And if your company's affected, you should have a company a company recovery plan. And if you can support your country in this journey to adopting a plan B, then use all your political influence and everything you've got to make a difference in the country when so many people are being polarized in 2 different directions. So we're trying to do it with peace, love, and unity, as I always say in my videos.